Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Alyssa Scarciotti. I'm the Client Education Manager here with Lexir Dental Group. Very happy to be hosting Dr. Geraldine Alfie. This session will be dental insurance contracts, what they are really costing you, session 2. If you were not able to attend the first session, please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be happy to send you that recording as well. This is a follow-up consecutive meeting to what we covered in the first one. So just feel free to send me an email and we'd be happy to share that with you. Couple little just housekeeping things. If you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. Dr. Alfie will likely just address those at the end, and we can go through and address any questions at the end. We've left some time for Q&A as well. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Dr. Geraldine Alfie. She spent 25 years as a practicing dentist. I actually met her many years ago, more than either of us would admit, when she was a hands-on instructor with PAC Live out in San Francisco. I was as impressed with her then as I am today. She's a published author, speaker, hands-on instructor, and mentor. She transitioned from clinical and went on to get her MBA through the Jack Welch Management Institute. She has a unique blend of clinical experience and also business acumen, which I think makes her very well suited for what she's doing now with this coaching. She's been doing this for years and had worked with a coach on her own for years as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Alfie to you, and I think you'll enjoy her presentation.
Great. Thank you, Alyssa, for that warm welcome and hosting this webinar. And a big thank you to all of you. I know personally at the end of a long clinical day, sometimes the last thing we feel like doing is hopping on a webinar. So thank you for taking an hour out of your time to hang out with us. My goal is to make this informative and entertaining and to really start you thinking about what other options might you have. Our goal between last month's part 1 of our webinar and tonight's part 2 is to help you get a much better idea about what's really going on in your practice and to help you see that being in network with some of these dental benefits plans may be negatively impacting your dental practice business. I hope you were all with us last month for part 1, and if you weren't, at least watch the recording because I'm going to be jumping right into the second half today. I will do a brief review of what we covered, but I'm assuming that you have a good basis for what we discussed on the first time. Excuse me. I'm going to do a brief recap of that first part, and then we're going to dive right into what I call the 7 steps to financial freedom, which you're going to want to complete before you decide to drop any participation with any plan. I'll review all 7 steps, and then we'll do a deep dive on the last 6 because we covered the first one in detail on our first part. So as I said today, we're going to be doing a quick review of why more dentists don't drop their contracts even when they know it's financially killing them. And I'm going to quickly review the first step in the 7 steps to financial freedom, and then go through the last 6 in detail. That is going to let you leave here with a game plan. Once you decide which companies are costing you the most, which ones to drop, in which order, and how to get you and your team ready to say bye-bye to those companies. When I talk about insurance companies, I use quotes for a reason, because you and I know that it is not technically insurance. It is a very teeny tiny benefit that they pay your patient each year, which, by the way, has not gone up since the 60s. My goal is to have some time at the end for Q&A. And as Alyssa said, if you have questions that come to mind, drop them in the chat and we'll get through as many as we can toward the end. To quickly review, what is the #1 reason why dentists won't drop their contracts? And the answer, I bet you know, is fear. They're afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose patients. They're afraid they're not going to get new patients. They're afraid their team will freak out, and they're afraid they're going to lose money. Well, last time, Clint Johnson from Profitable PPO, who was my co-host, between the two of us, we showed you that you are already losing a lot of money if you are contracted with any of these plans. Even if you agree and you feel that you are ready to make that decision. Some of you may still have lingering doubts or concerns, which I totally get. Instead of staying stuck in that fearful place, let's not focus on our fears. Let's focus on the facts and create an actionable game plan that will help put you in control. There is a ton of data out there, and I have multiple experiences as a coach that when you plan ahead, get your team on board, up your customer service, and boost your marketing plan, you can extricate yourself from every single program out there over time. It can be done in a very systematic way with very little impact to your practice. You know how I know it's doable? Because it's been done thousands of times. And here's how you can do it too. This is what I call my 7 steps to financial freedom. 1, know your numbers. We went into great detail about that last time. 2, set your drop date. 3, team buy-in and training. 4, turbocharge your marketing. 5, offer an in-office membership plan. 6, master personalized customer service. And 7, add high value and discretionary services. The first step is you must know your numbers. I'm going to quickly review all of these that we went through in part 1 to just give you a reminder of what we covered in detail. And you can find all of this information about your numbers in your own practice management software. The first is your active patient count. An active patient is defined as anyone that's been in your practice for any procedure within the previous 18 to 24 months. The benchmark in a healthy practice is 1,400 to 1,600 active patients per doctor. Now, when you run your active patient count, if you find that you're somewhere around 1,000 to 1,100 active patients, it's not the time for you to drop plans yet. You need to get your patient base up a little bit more to give you some breathing room. You need to know specifically which companies and plans you're contracted with. You want to know how many of your active patients are in each plan. Then you can determine the percentage to be able to compare apples to apples when you're looking at each individual plan and how much they are forcing you to write off of the top. If you are in a number of plans, I usually recommend that if you're thinking about dropping any of them, start with either the one that is causing the greatest write-off for you, and ideally the one that has the fewest number of your active patients in that group. That helps minimize the impact to your practice. You need to know what the gross production for the entire office is, what the production is per group, and what your hourly overhead is. You want to know what the adjustment percentage is per group. This way you can compare apples to apples. Which one of these is causing you the greatest amount of grief, which is causing you the biggest write-off, the biggest adjustment off your gross production? I mentioned last time more than once. On average, these companies are forcing you to write off, give away, never collect 30 to 40% of your gross production, which is based on your office's UCR fees. What is the annual patient value per group? Because again, then you can compare apples to apples. The annual patient value is the amount that your patient spends in your practice over the course of a year. Whichever group is on the lowest end of this APV is probably one of the groups that you're thinking you're going to be dropping first. And if you want another point of comparison, the average national annual patient value in the US in 2022 was between $750 and $1,000 per year. And you want to know how many new patients are driven to your practice because you take that patient's insurance. But remember, we talked about this last time. When you consider that being part of one of these plans is part of your marketing costs, the reality is, are these companies really marketing you? No, they're not really marketing you. They're listing you on their website with 1,000 other dentists in your area, because that is not what we call targeted marketing. It is not the way to drive in your ideal patient to allow you to do more of the dentistry that you love to do. And don't forget that magic replacement ratio. When you lose patients that have one of these plans that you drop, you don't need the same number of fee-for-service patients to protect the amount of production that may be leaving your practice. For example, Delta on average forces a 50% write-off for most offices based off of their UCR fees. The good news is that means if you lose 10 Delta patients, since you're giving away half your production by being part of that plan, you only need 5 fee-for-service patients to replace the 10 Delta patients that left and keep your production stable. That's the kind of magic math that I like. Now, once you know which plans are the worst and will be first on the chopping block, you want to set your drop date. You want your drop date to be 6 months out at a minimum. Why do I pick 6 months? What happens in a dental practice on a 6-month cycle? Well, your patients are coming through your hygiene department, I hope at least every 6 months. This allows you to have face-to-face conversations with those patients to help them understand why you've made this decision. You have to be aware of what is the notification time frame for each of these plans. Some of them, from the moment you notify them that you're going out of network to the time that you're considered out of network, it could be 30 days, it could be 60 days, it could be 90 days or more. You want to be able to know what is your window to be able to talk to those patients. So you need to know this before you set your drop date. If you are terminating direct participation with these plans, and they'll get picked up under one of those umbrella plans that we talked about last time, like Carrington or Maverist or Connection. If you're already in network with one of those umbrella plans, and that company that you're dropping direct participation with will get picked up under that umbrella plan, you need to figure out with your team, how do you want to handle that limbo time from the time that you're out of network as a direct participator and the patients are now covered under the umbrella plan. Most of my practices, what they will do is they will honor the previous fee schedule and let the patient know that no changes are going to happen on their end. Now, sometimes those companies will notify your patients and send them some scary letter that you have dropped them and that, the patient, of course, is going to die if they go to you instead of an in-network provider, which of course we know is not true. And what you can do is just tell your patients, we are going through a negotiation phase with that company. We are still honoring your fee schedule. We're still going to submit your claims. If we accept assignment of benefits, we're still doing all of that. None of that is going to change. As soon as we get through our negotiation, everything returns to normal. That helps your patients feel much more comfortable. Now, once you're covered under this umbrella plan, what you're going to find is that even if you're accepting assignment of benefits, your checks from those companies start to be much more significant because you're no longer tied to that anemic fee schedule. Often the direct participation has the worst fee schedule. When you're under an umbrella plan, it tends to be healthier. It's still never going to be as good as your own UCR fee schedule, but it's still better. And you and your team need to decide, do you want to still accept assignment of benefits if you go out of direct participation with one of these plans? If you want to minimize patient loss, I recommend that you still accept assignment of benefits. This is the best route to go. What you're going to do is you're still going to get your reimbursement checks from the companies, but they'll be much more substantial. And even though your patients may be paying a little bit more for their copay for more major procedures, it eases that transition a lot for your patients, so they're not paying in full at the time of service. Now, there's only one company that makes it very difficult to do that, and can you imagine which one that is? Yes, Delta. Delta makes it nearly impossible for the doctor to receive assignment of benefits. They like to send it to the patient because they know that in the patient's mind, the perception is that they're paying in full ahead of time. And we know that that is not the case. Once you've set your drop date, you need to ensure that your team is 100% bought into this decision and that they are fully trained to handle any potential patient objections. If you do not have 100% alignment from every team member, just one person can torpedo all the efforts of everyone else in your practice. Everyone has to be on board with this decision. Now, the first thing I do with my clients when they're making these decisions is we have an all-team meeting and we workshop this before the final decision is made to potentially drop one of those plans. We review all of their fears and concerns. We call these sometimes limiting beliefs about that insurance is really important, the reason why our patients choose us, when we know, in fact, that is almost never the main reason why our patients choose us. But we want to have open and honest discussions about their fears and concerns, get them out on the table so that we can then take those limiting beliefs and focus on the facts, the truths, and turn them into empowering beliefs for every team member. What are some of those facts? We talked about this the last time. 30% of the US population does not have coverage, and that number is increasing because people are leaving corporate jobs and going to work for themselves. They usually don't have coverage. There are a number of other providers in your area who are also dropping their participation. That means your patients have fewer choices if they decide to leave your practice. There is still a huge demand for services between the COVID shutdown and also the aesthetic demand that is asking for Invisalign. I share with you that Align basically doubled their revenues from 2020 to 2022. So we know people are asking for these types of services. And when a dental practice changes its participation with one of these plans, the maximum patient loss that we anticipate is 20% of the patients with that plan may leave your practice. I have never seen anything close to that, and I will even walk you through a couple of examples of own clients of mine later tonight so that you can see that they do this on purpose to scare you. But don't focus on the fear, focus on the facts. These are general truths that apply to every dental practice, but what makes your practice unique? When you think about your best patients, think about why do they choose your office? I can almost guarantee it's not because you accept their insurance, as they so say. They pick you because you deliver exquisite dentistry. You have fabulous customer service. You've got great relationships with those people. You have wonderful technology, a beautiful practice, whatever makes your practice unique. That's why your best patients choose your office. Because we know that our relationship with our patient is not based on whether or not I accept their insurance. The reality is you cannot provide quality care when you are forced to write off a third to a half of your regular fee. It just can't be done. And you refuse to compromise the quality of care that you deliver to your patients that they have come to expect. And that is the main reason why you have considered leaving these plans. The next things that we review are, we want to review what's not changing in the practice. We ensure that every team member knows, understands, and can convey that to every single patient that has any kind of an objection to this. I do provide scripts to all of my teams. I do recommend that they just use them as a blueprint. You want to understand the essence of the message and then put it into your own words, because when you just memorize a script, it sounds inauthentic, and that's certainly not what we're going for here. We review the most frequently asked questions and how to handle those patient objections. We identify patients that have that plan, so we know when is that person coming in. Once we identify the patients that are in that plan, over the next couple of weeks, we do this every single week, we see who's coming in this week that has that plan. And then figure out who on our team has the best relationship with that patient, because that's the person that should be having the face-to-face discussion. It doesn't always, you can't just knee-jerk and shove it off to the admin team and say, I don't know on any of this, you need to talk to them about it. Every person on your team needs to be comfortable talking to your patients about the basics as to why you've decided to make this decision. And it has to come from a place of confidence. Now, when we talk about change, we want to think about what is our end point. Our end goal is that you retain a minimum of 85 to 90% of your patients who have that plan. How do we deal with change? Change scares the heck out of a lot of people. If you didn't believe that before, I believe the shutdown probably proved that to you. There was constant change that was thrust upon us on a daily basis, often with no rhyme or reason, and it created massive stress for millions of people. Even those of us who embrace change, we don't like it so much when other people are making the decision to change. So how do we get people to feel more comfortable with change? We focus on what is staying the same. This is the #1 misunderstood concept by patients and even some team members, that when you go out of network, your patients can still use their benefits in your office. Patients have been trained by the medical community that if you see a doctor who's out of network, you're paying 100% of the total bill. And you and I know that that is not how dental benefits work. It is not insurance. Your team has to 100% understand this so that they can make it clear to your patients. You can still use your benefits in our practice. We have many patients who do. You will still verify coverage for them. You will still file their claims and advocate and fight for them to get every last penny of compensation that they are due. For most procedures, the estimated coverage doesn't change. There will be a little bit more out of pocket for major procedures, and I'll walk you through an example of this a little later so you can see how the math actually works. But this becomes less and less of an issue because really, if there's $1,000 annual maximum, how far does that go in your practice nowadays? If you will still accept assignment of benefits from the company, you need to make that crystal clear to your patients. Because what they often think is, you're out of network, I got to pay for everything upfront, which is never the right term because the only time you pay upfront is when you pay prior to a service being delivered. Patients are paying at the time of service. But if you're accepting assignment of benefits, that means that your patients that are coming in for regular hygiene visits, you're still going to just be basically checking them out and waiting to get the assignment check from the company. So they're not reaching into their pocket every single time they come in to see you. That's the big fear and misunderstanding that patients have when you go out of network. And I highly recommend that you have financial options available to make their treatment more affordable and be able to fit into their budget. When patients ask about insurance, it's usually an affordability question. They're used to having this $1,000 handout every year. So if we can find additional ways to help them save money, say with an in-office membership plan, and have ability for them to do outside financing using like CareCredit or Moment or Affirm, then it makes it easier for your patients to do the dentistry they want now and figure out how to budget paying for it over time. Now, I would really prefer that you don't offer an in-office payment plan. You're not a bank. You don't know how banks work. It is not your wheelhouse. Stick to what you know, which is delivering excellent dentistry, and let those other companies handle it for you. Okay? Can you promise me that? Any of you that are doing it right now, please stop right now. Let them do their jobs. You focus on what you excel at. Now you can screenshot these next two slides because I'm just going to show you 13 different frequently asked questions that I workshop with my teams. These are the ones that seem to come up the most. And besides going through the questions, what I would recommend you do is then sit down with your team and brainstorm, how do we want to answer each of these? As I said before, I don't recommend memorizing a script. I recommend talking about the essence of each of the answers and then having each team member put it into her own words. Everyone on the team must be uniform in their belief and conviction in the reason why your practice did this. You know it was a difficult decision, and you are going to make this transition as easy as possible for your patients. The next step is to turbocharge your marketing. I touched on marketing briefly during our first session, so let's go through it in a bit more detail because this is super important for you to be able to fill your practice with ideal patients. Now, do you remember what the overhead percentage of your net collections was when we're talking about your marketing budget? When we looked at that pie of all the costs that the doctor has to pay, as a percentage of your net collections, we want to earmark 3 to 5% of our net collections to pay for our marketing budget. Your marketing must already be driving in your ideal patients before you make the decision to drop any plan. I told you that the benchmark for new patients in a healthy practice is 20 to 40 new patients per month per doctor. If you have a 2-doctor practice, then it's 40 to 80 new patients per month per doctor. If you're not close to that number yet, I do not want you to consider dropping a plan. You still need to make it easier for people to come in, get to know you, see how wonderful you are, and boost your patient numbers before you consider dropping a plan. If you're at the point where you're ready to drop one of the plans, the first thing we want to do when it comes to your marketing is identify your ideal patient. Okay, that's going to be different for every single practice based off of the uniqueness of your practice. And the best way to figure this out is you workshop it with your team. You plan one of your meetings, you get out a whiteboard, You have every team member think of her 3 most favorite patients. You write those names down on your whiteboard, and then you list all the character traits that make those patients your ideal patients. And what similarities do they have? When you pick the top 5 to 10 traits, you put them together and you've created an avatar of your ideal patient. Once you have identified this person, now we need to know, how are we going to get in contact with her? Where does she hang out? I hope that they're asking when a new patient calls. The second or third question should be, how did you hear about us? So if more of your ideal patients are consistently saying, oh, I saw you on Instagram or Facebook, and then I went to your website, then we know this is where your ideal patient spends her time, which means that more people just like her are spending time in those media. So we want to be focusing on that. And we have to craft an ideal marketing message that is going to speak to what's most important to that ideal patient of yours. Google, as you know, is insanely important. And if you are not showing up on the first page of Google, no one's finding you. I'm sorry to tell you, but no one has the patience or the attention span to scroll for more than 30 seconds to find a dental practice. If you don't pop up immediately, ideally on the Google map, they're finding someone else to go hang out with. Now, if you're finding that for your most relevant keywords, you are not popping up on the top, you need to talk to your marketing company to boost your SEO. Is your website user-friendly? And I hope that you are updating it constantly. You want lots of video, lots of photos, great content that really draws your patients in and keeps them there. Your marketing company can also run all your reports for you every month so that you know, how many new visits do you get? Which pages do they go to most often? How long do they spend on each page? And most importantly, how many of those people are actually moving forward and either making an appointment through your website or immediately picking up the phone to call you for an appointment? Because that's the whole point of all of our marketing. It's not just to pop up in front of people, it's to make them take action and engage with us and become a patient in our practice. That's why we're doing all of this. If you find that those numbers are not where you want them, then again, you need to work with your marketing company to boost anything that they need to do, whether it's changing your text, figuring out, I don't know, all the back stuff that they do, but it's magic when it works well. So work with a company that really understands it, especially specifically for dental practices. What is your social media presence? Are you active? Are you posting, 3 to 4 times a week? The main purpose of social media, I believe, is to drive people to your website. You want to pique that person's interest from something that you post and then make them intrigued enough that they're going to go to your website and hopefully what? Make an appointment. Internal referrals are so important. It is one of the easiest and most cost-effective ways to organically grow your practice. Now, when it comes to internal referrals, I'm often asked 3 questions. 1, whom do we ask? 2, when do we ask? And 3, how do we ask? Well, the answer to whom we ask is everyone. Yes, you heard me right. Every single patient that comes into your practice should be asked to refer their family and friends. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Geraldine, I don't want to ask Mrs. Crabapple for a referral. I don't want more Mrs. Crabapples in my practice. I heard about this first decades ago. It was the first time I ever saw Howard Farran speak. Any of you that are old enough to know Howard, he was talking about this back in the 90s. And someone in the audience asked that exact question. Well, why would I ask one of the jerks in my practice to refer? I don't want more jerks in my practice. And Howard's answer was, even jerks have nice friends. So ask everyone, okay? When do we ask for a referral? The easiest time to do that is when someone has thanked you or complimented you. And how do we ask for a referral? It's as simple as this. So Mrs. Ideal Patient, how was your visit today? Oh, it was wonderful. Dr. Fabulous always takes such great care of me. Mrs. Ideal Patient, we are so happy to hear that. May I ask you for a huge favor? Of course. We love seeing you, and we would love to see more people who are just like you. Can you think of anyone who would appreciate and value our level of care and service? We would love to welcome them to our dental family. And then you give her a minute to think of somebody. I was leaving the office and I was telling Sally, my coworker, that I was going to the dentist, and she thought that I was absolutely crazy because I was excited to come and see you guys because she has a fear of dentists. She's never had a good experience. I know you would all take great care of her. Mrs. Ideal Patient, that is wonderful. We would love to welcome Sally to our practice by offering her $50 off of her new patient visit. And once she completes that, we will also credit your account $50 as a way of saying thank you for your trust in us. I want you to know that you're always a bright spot in our day. We would love to fill our practice with more people just like you. Easy peasy. In general, I like to see at least 50% of new patients coming into a practice that are driven by direct referrals from your existing patient base. It is, as I said, the easiest and most cost-effective way to organically grow your practice. Are you utilizing your client relationship management software to stay top of mind with all of your existing patients? And that's like Weave or Solution Reach. There are a bunch of them out there. Excuse me. I am sure that you're collecting email from every single patient that's coming in. And are you actually utilizing them? Are you sending out a biweekly or a monthly newsletter? And don't make every single one of them a promo. Share some funny stories about you and your team. Mention local events. Your patients want to get to know you as people. And then have a call to action that ties into something in your practice to make them want to do something. It's sad but true, but our patients forget all about us in that 6-month period between their hygiene visits unless they come in. So this is one way to stay in front of them on a more regular basis. And I also hope that your team members are asking for reviews and testimonials. Video testimonials are the most powerful type of testimonial because you actually hear and feel the emotion in that patient's voice. The best people to ask for video testimonials are the patients that have been with you forever and just love you all to death, or when you've completed a case that has truly transformed somebody's life. That has much more power than a written testimonial. Video is always better. Now, when it comes to reviews, what I recommend is that you leverage your client relationship management software. I hope that you are automatically sending out post-appointment surveys to every single person every time they come in, where we ask 3 questions about how their visit was. And then we say, if you really enjoyed your experience, would you mind sharing that on Google? Have your link so that they can easily click and then leave you a 5-star glowing review. Google is the only one that you have to worry about. It is the granddaddy of all of them. I do have some clients that still do ask for Yelp and some of the other ones, but if you build your Google presence, that also helps you when you're popping up in front of your ideal patient. So Google is the one that you want to focus on. In the past, a consumer had to be exposed to a marketing message an average of 8 to 15 times before she made a buying decision, unless she was really hot to try. Well, now it's 15 to 20 times because we are also inundated with notifications and messages and alerts. And that's just from the people that we actually want to talk to. Never mind some blind marketing ad that's just screaming at us. You must rise above the noise. And you want to have a clear and consistent message that speaks to what is most important to your ideal patient. Obviously, this is a hugely important job. I highly recommend that you outsource this to an expert company. You still want to have someone on your team who is your marketing source person, who's going to be managing and overseeing it, but you want the experts figuring out how to boost your presence, how to work with you to ensure that your message is staying consistent and getting pushed out to your ideal patient audience. The 5th step to financial freedom is to offer an in-office membership plan. Now, I can't spend a ton of time talking about these, but for those of you that aren't familiar with them, excuse me, it's basically a program where your patients are going to save money on their annual hygiene visits, and they'll also receive a small courtesy toward any dental work that they have done while they're a member of their plan. Most offices are offering 10 to 20% off of their dental treatment to these in-office membership plan members. Now, I know what you're thinking. Geraldine, you've been talking about not writing off any of my production, and now you want me to write off 10%, because I always tell my clients, only offer 10%. Don't give away 20%. You might as well still be in the insurance plans. Offer 10%. That is enough of an incentive for people to do something. And yes, I do prefer 10% to 30 to 40%, because what these companies have found that when you have members of these plans, they do more dentistry in your practice. You know why? Because there are no limitations. There are no waiting periods. There's no annual maximum. There's no paperwork. You don't have any time wasted on rejections and fighting claims. No follow-up that's necessary. It incentivizes your patient to do more dentistry in your practice. She can use that 10% courtesy toward anything she wants to do in your practice, whether it's Botox or fillers or Invisalign or implants or crowns, or that quadrant of restorative she's been putting off, or a night guard, or you get the picture. Anything at all. And make the plan simple. Don't have it, it's 10% for these things, it's 15% for these things. Just pick your number and it's across the board. Pick a number that you're comfortable with that makes sense for your finances. This gives your patient options. She can use it for anything that she wants. And what these plans have found is that not only are more patients doing more dentistry, and they are increasing the number of visits per year, which is one of the easiest ways to generate more revenue in our practice. The amount of money that is being driven by these patients on these plans is often higher than your regular fee-for-service patients. Isn't that an interesting fact? It gives your patient the freedom to be able to control her own oral health and her own choices. And it gives you and your practice the freedom and control over your own finances. So this is a no-brainer in my mind. Now you can develop your own plan, but like I always say, outsource this to the experts. There are a number of companies out there that will be able to develop this for you, track it. They have great websites where your patient can go in at her convenience to see, what she's already done, make her own appointments, make it simple. Okay, the amount that they charge is minimal. And as I said, the return on your investment is huge. Master personalized customer service. Now, I could talk about customer service for hours and hours and hours. It's been a passion of mine for decades. If you want your patients to perceive the value of what it is that you're providing, every member of your team must be an expert in delivering personalized customer service to every patient every time she comes into your practice. We have to remember that every time our patient enters our practice, she is making a decision about whether she wants to return or find another dental practice. So don't take any of your patients for granted. You want to wow each one of them each time. How do we do this? If you want to do the bare bones minimum, do these things. Make sure that your receptionist is answering the phone by the second ring, that she is speaking in a pleasant and intelligible voice and identifies herself, that she is actively listening to that patient, asking great follow-up questions, and using the patient's name throughout the conversation. If you only do these three things, you will already be head and shoulders above most dental practices, not to mention most companies in almost every single industry in the world today. Do you agree? Customer service is scarcer than hen's teeth. If you really want extra points and to really stand out, make sure you remember your patients' names and their personal information when they come in. Start and end your appointments on time. This is an enormous pet peeve for me. And guess what? It is the #1 complaint from patients when it comes to their dental practice. If you find that you are consistently not running on time, let me give you a couple of reasons why this is so important. One, when you consistently do not seat your patients on time, your patients think in their heads, he doesn't respect my time. And they can quickly jump to, which means he doesn't respect me. That is certainly not the impression we want to give our patients. The other thing is that if you consistently are not running on time, have you found that most of your patients show up late to their appointments? Gee, I wonder why that happens. You basically have trained them to show up late because you're always running late. You have made it clear to them that it is not important to you to be on time. We train people how to treat us. If this is a constant struggle for you, I recommend that you sit down with your team and figure out how to better block your schedule so that you can start on time, end on time, and stay on time. Because here's the thing, when you run late with a patient, not only does it mess up the rest of your office's schedule and the patient's following that, but what about the patient actually in the chair? Because maybe she had another appointment immediately after, and she has figured out her entire day based off of the fact that you told her she would be in your chair for an hour, but you didn't get her seated until 15 minutes into her appointment. And now it's an hour and a half later, and she may have to reschedule her next appointment or miss it altogether. It is incredibly disrespectful. I would rather you boost your appointments by an additional 10 minutes or so until you can figure out exactly how much time you need to do each procedure predictably. Okay, time your procedures so that you can give your admin team a good idea about how much time to book for whatever procedure it is that you do on a regular basis. If you do this one thing, your patients will love you even more. Now, when I was practicing, it was a running joke. I was fanatical about running on time, and it got drilled into our patients' heads, pun intended, from the very first phone call. We knew we had to retrain every single patient from all of their previous dental practice experiences, not to mention any medical doctor experiences. We made it very clear that Dr. Alfie and her hygienists see their patients on time. If your appointment is at 10 a.m., we expect to see you crossing the threshold no later than 9:59:59. If for some bizarre reason it was 5 minutes into your appointment and you weren't there yet, you got a phone call. Now, if I decided to see you, when you showed up, I sat you down and I made it very clear in uncertain terms, in no uncertain terms, that this was not acceptable. And that if you violated our policy one more time, you would lose the privilege of reserving time with us. That is how seriously I took this, because we all know that the schedule is the lifeblood of the practice. And believe it or not, when your team is very well trained in verbal skills and making sure the patients understand the value of reserving time with you and keeping that appointment, it can dramatically drop the number of late patients and cancellations when it's handled right, because you really do have a lot more control over building and maintaining your schedule than you might think. Okay, I practiced for many years through many different types of financial upheavals and world events that were happening. It is possible to build and maintain your ideal schedule as long as it's highest priority for you and your team. And you make sure that your patients understand that too, because that is high value. When your patients can get seen and get out on time, they value you more. Did I make that clear? You think I'm a little obsessed with that? It drives me crazy. Make sure you have a transparent financial policy. Your billing policies must be clear and consistent. I recommend that they're included in your new patient paperwork. I even recommend that they're on your website, on your finance page. It has been shown that across the board, the finance page on a dental website is one of the most visited pages for new patients. I'm sorry, it just started pouring out over here. I got a little distracted. Sorry about that. And no patient should leave your office with an upcoming appointment without having a signed treatment plan and their financial arrangements specifically clear for any appointments that they have coming up. I don't care if it's their next hygiene appointment. If you eventually want to get to the point where you're going to be fee for service, you have to have all of these steps in place way before you drop that last plan, which means that your financial coordinator needs to be exquisite in the way that she talks about financial arrangements with your patients and the options they have to be able to afford the kind of dentistry that they want. If you want to destroy a patient's relationship with you very quickly, pay no attention to their money. Bait and switch them or nickel and dime them. That is the easiest way to get people to leave your practice. I don't recommend that you do that. I want to know what my patient values the most when it comes to her dental work. How do I find that out? It's quite simple. I ask her on her first visit. So Mary, when it comes to your dental work, what's most important to you? Is it longevity or aesthetics or function or comfort? Out of those four, which one really rings the bell for you? Now, if Mary tells me aesthetics is the most important value to her in how her dental work is delivered, then it morphs how I present my treatment to her. For example, let's say Mary needs a crown on number 14. Now, am I going to focus on how well it's going to chew or that it's going to last longer than anything else I'm going to be able to do, or that she's going to be comfortable during her visit? No, I don't focus on that. I mention it, but what I focus on is that when we remove that ugly old black filling and replace it with this beautiful porcelain crown, it's going to match her other pearly whites. And now she's going to be happy when she looks at her selfies that she's taking. She no longer has to avoid taking it from this angle because that ugly tooth was constantly showing. The treatment remains the same, no matter what value that patient had chosen, but the way I present it is quite different. That's all about getting into rapport with your patients and getting to know them as people. The reality is we are not in the tooth business. We are in the people business. And when you understand psychology, you'll find that your treatment plan acceptance rate goes through the roof. And I highly recommend outsourcing everything that is a task that doesn't boost your customer experience. I've already mentioned your in-office membership plan, your marketing, excuse me. And there are multiple companies that will allow you to outsource your insurance processing. Now, the ones that I have the most experience with are called Dental Claim Support and eAssist. Those are ones that my own clients have used over the past few years. Why do I recommend this? Well, let's see. They are the experts. They know what they're doing. I do include whatever it costs my client to pay for these services. I include it as part of the team cost. Why do I do that? Well, let's see. They are part of your team, but you know what? They cost you a lot less than if you hired someone to be in your practice. Why? Because you're not paying payroll taxes for that company. You're not offering benefits. There's no downtime for them to figure out what to do. They already know what to do. They're the experts. And there's no calling in sick or unexpected days off. It really helps your practice run much more consistently. Now, most of these are going to charge a percentage of whatever the total collections are. So if they don't collect a lot for you, you're not paying them a lot. Here's what happens though. Every client I have that has worked with one of these companies has found that they are collecting so much more. And partly because these companies go through every one of your claims with a fine-tooth comb. They ensure that everything is coded correctly. And they ensure that everything is included in that claim that maybe in the past you weren't. For example, doctors, how many of you, when you deliver a crown, are taking a post-seat x-ray? How many of you actually charge for that? Now, granted, 20 to 30 bucks isn't going to move the needle, but how many crowns do you do each year? This is another way where you can maximize your reimbursements from these companies. The last step is to add or boost high value and discretionary services. What are some of those? Veneers, whitening, implants, sleep apnea, Botox and fillers, all on fours, night guards, sports guards, adult ortho, Invisalign. These are just some of the services that those companies either didn't cover at all or covered such a minuscule amount that it really does not affect you if you go out of network. When you think about what services do I want to add or boost in my practice, think about the services that you see on your schedule that really make your heart sing, that you would love to see just a column of patients that were only asking for these types of services. Now, if you find like you can't get those patients into your schedule because you're too overbooked, then you need to sit down with your scheduling coordinator and figure out how to better block your schedule. If you're not doing as many of these as you would like, and you realize it's because you lack the confidence, well, heck, all the CE companies are back to work. Everyone is offering courses in person now. So take you and your team so that you can get trained and gain the confidence to be able to provide and talk to your patients about these services. As I mentioned, most of these services had little to zero reimbursement anyway. So it's an easy pivot. And if you offer an in-office membership plan and have outside financing available to your patients, then they are going to be able to do the dentistry they want now at a little bit less money and be able to budget it over time. I'm confident that if you follow those 7 steps, know your numbers, set your drop date, get your team bought in and get them trained like crazy, turbocharge your marketing, offer an in-office membership plan, master personalized customer service, and add high value and discretionary services. If you do all of these really well, your practice will be in a much better financial position 18 to 24 months from now, and maybe even sooner, based off of where you're starting. Now, I just want to wrap up with showing you a few examples so that you can actually wrap your head around how this math works, okay? Sorry that I'm ending with math. I know for most of us, we want to do that at the beginning, but I will walk you through this. I want to help allay your fears even more by showing you a real example from a client who went out of network with Cigna. Now, Cigna covers preventive at 100%, like most of the companies do. When the doctor was an in-network provider, his office got paid $104 for a periodic exam and a pro fee. As an out-of-network provider, the office got paid $190 for a periodic exam and a pro fee. Each hygiene visit netted an additional $86 for the practice. The patient paid $0 extra. Cigna paid the additional $86. There was no difference in cost to the patient. Now, for this particular plan, Cigna was covering crowns at 60%, which is quite unusual. Usually they tap out at 50%. When the doctor was contracted with them, his in-network provider fee was dictated at $986. That's the most he could charge for a crown. If Cigna is covering 60%, that means that Cigna is paying $591.60, and the patient's out of pocket for his copay was $394.40. As an out-of-network provider, he's no longer tied to that anemic fee schedule, so the doctor can charge his regular fee of $1560, which is a very reasonable amount for this crown. Yes? Cigna is still going to pay 60% of that because this falls within their designation of UCR that is acceptable for your zip code. They compare you to other dentists in your own zip code. And as long as your fees aren't grossly higher than those, they're going to still honor their 100 or 80 or 60% or 50%. So now in this case, now the doctor can charge his actual fee of $1560. Cigna is covering 60% of that. So Cigna is now paying $936 instead of $591.60. And the patient is responsible, well, the patient's responsible for all of it, but the copay for the patient is $624. So it's a bit more, but not a ton. By being able to charge his regular fee instead of that contracted fee, his practice makes an additional $574 per crown. Cigna pays an additional $344.40. The patient is going to pay an additional $229.60. What does that mean over the course of a year for this patient? The difference to the patient is only $229.60. But the annual value of that patient, I talked about annual patient value before, it now increases by $746 when you consider that patient comes in for 2 hygiene visits. That's an additional $86 each time, plus an additional $574, just by being out of network and being able to charge his own fees. As I mentioned, if you are within the 80th percentile of the offices within your zip code, and Clint talked about this in detail last time, in almost every case, I have seen that the company is still reimbursing at either 100% or 80% or 50%, whatever the original, agreement was. They're still at least honoring that percentage. So you can see where these numbers can start to get real very quick. I've already talked about the fact why dentists don't drop their participation, why they don't drop these contracts is because they're afraid. Well, let's not let fear drive our decisions. I believe in making decisions based on hard data, information, and facts. I'm going to walk you through how I present this to one of my own clients when they are considering going out of network. This represents a real practice, and we were projecting because she was going to be dropping Delta in 2022 based off of her 2021 numbers. Now, it is a solo doctor and 2 hygienist practice. She does general dentistry, no ortho, no cosmetics, no sleep apnea, no surgery, no implant placement, true general dentistry. She had 2,100 active patients. Now, you remember the benchmark for active patients is 1,400 to 1,600. So you may look at 2,100 and say, wow, she's doing great. Yeah, not really. She was too busy. There was no time to be able for her hygienist to be able to schedule a perio patient because they were booked out 8 months. New patients were waiting 9 months to see this doctor because that's how far out she was booked. That is actually not a good scenario. And she and her hygienist and the rest of her team were running around crazy. They were getting run ragged. In fact, when I first started working with her, the main reason she even listened to me to talk about possibly going out of network with some of these plans is because she was burnt out. Her team was burnt out. She couldn't physically do this anymore. And I told her, I get it. I don't want you to. What if there were another way? So I dove into all of her numbers, and I'm not making this up. She was in network with over 30 plans. So we worked with Profitable PPO, Clint from our last webinar, and they evaluated all her patients, all her plans, the production amounts, the write-off amounts, et cetera. And then we started working on her 7 steps to financial freedom. We got her out of direct participation with every other insurance company over 12 to 16 months, except for Delta. It's always the last network to drop because, as you know, they are the 5,000-pound, hairy, smelly gorilla in the room. They purposefully make it so difficult for you, your patients, to go to a non-network provider because, as I said, they almost across the board refuse to assign the benefits to the doctor's practice, which means that your patients are paying at the time of service. Now, I mentioned, don't use the term upfront. Okay, your patients do not pay upfront for your services. If they are paying at the time of service, it's because you just completed that procedure. Okay, paying at the time of service is no different than when you go buy your clothes, go out for a dinner, go out, have a drink, pay your kids' tuition. No, wait, actually, you are paying upfront for your kids' tuition. But for every other service industry, you are paying at the time of service. And that's why Delta makes what their policies the way they do, because they know that people's perception is that it's going to cost them more. And it can make some patients fearful. But when you plan ahead and you know what to expect, it's actually not that difficult to extricate yourself from that company. So let's walk through the math together. I told you this doctor had 2,100 active patients. Now I need to know how many of those patients are part of Delta. Ooh, 1,023. That's almost half her practice. Do you think her team was a little worried when we first started talking about this? You're darn tootin' they were. They got much more calm as I walked them through these examples. The office's gross production the previous year was $1,635,732. And by the way, this is almost double what it was when I first started working with her 2 years prior. Okay, she doubled her production, not by adding hours or adding days or adding team members. They just started working smarter, not harder. And because during that time period, I was getting her out of direct participation with all those other companies, her production and collections just automatically went up, doing the same type of work. As I said, that's the kind of math that I like. Now, if 49% of her practice is Delta, we take almost half of what her total gross production is and assume that her Delta patients drove $703,365 to her practice the previous year. I mentioned before that the worst case scenario of the percentage of patients with that plan who will leave your practice when you go out of network is 20%. But when I'm dealing with something like this, I actually like to overestimate the possible worst case scenario so that we can see what that math looks like to help allay the team's fears. Because I knew in my heart there was no way 30% of her patients were going to leave her. But let's just say they did. What is that actually going to do to her numbers? Well, if she loses 30% of the production that was driven by her Delta patients, we take 703,365 multiply times 30%, she potentially could lose $211,009 in production if 30% of those Delta patients leave. Well, if 30% of them leave, what does that mean? It means that 70% of them stay. So what's 70% of 703,365? It's $492,355 of production that we expect is going to stay in the practice. But wait, that's not the whole picture. She's now able to charge her regular fee. Delta, when she was part of their network, because of the write-off that she was forced to take, chopped 45% off of her production based off of her UCR fees. And her UCR fees are not unreasonable at all. It's just that that's how bad their fee schedule is. I really don't like them at all, in case you didn't get that. They were just the worst. So now if she's not giving away, writing off 45% of her production, then from those 70% of the Delta patients who are going to stay, that 492,355, she's actually going to be able to collect 221,560 because this is based off of her actual fee, not what the anemic fee schedule was. So the production that she now can expect to keep is the 492, 355. That was the original production from the 70% of the Delta patients that are going to stay, plus not having to write off. So that's an additional 221, 560. So her production from 70% of those Delta patients, we are figuring that it's going to be somewhere around 713, 915. Do you remember how much 100% of the Delta patients were driving in production? It was 703, 365, which means by going out of network and seeing 30% fewer patients, the office is actually making more money. Now, 10,550 is not a huge amount, especially when you consider how it compares to the amount of production in that practice. But what happens if 30% of those patients don't leave? What would that look like? Well, almost 1 year after she dropped Delta, fewer than 100 Delta patients left her practice. And out of them, by the way, it was only 91. 36 of them were kids and 55 were adults. Now, I'm not saying that children don't count, but when it comes to a general dental practice, it's the adult population that's driving our production. So about 5% of her Delta patients, because she started with 1,023, left her practice. I can live with that percentage. It's certainly far below 20%, isn't it? This goes to show that when your office culture is strong and supportive, when you plan ahead, when your team is 100% bought into this and you support each other and work together, this model can work. And what happens is you see fewer patients. So what does that mean to you? Well, it means you have a more controlled schedule. You can actually spend more time with your patients. You can enjoy your days more and make more money doing the same thing you were doing just by being able to charge a regular fee. What could you do with all that extra money? Just for doing what you were doing before, by actually being able to bring home the money you earned? You could establish a bonus or a profit sharing program for your team. I talked about this in detail in the first webinar I did with Lexer on profitable practices and how everyone can win when that happens. You can build up your team. You can add team members. You can add days. You can add hours. You can hire specialized outsourcing companies. You can build out or update your facilities, add a location or move, buy another practice, refinance your practice, upgrade your website, your SEO, and your social media presence, really boost your marketing to drive in more ideal patients. Invest in clinical technology and equipment. Take your team to high-end CE. Upgrade your computers. That's just what you could do for your practice. What about what you could do for yourself? You can invest your money for yourself and your family's future. You can set up a trust or estate plan to protect your money for yourself and your family's future. You could live better. Right now, I want you to close your eyes and picture what your life could be like in 12 to 18 months when you have more control over your practice and your schedule and your finances. What could you do with that extra money? Well, if you're still shooting for ideas, here are some other
We're
options.
still bent on blowing this fat stack of cash. There's a couple ways you could do it.
I've seen that video hundreds of times because I use it when I'm doing my marketing presentations too, and the baby always cracks me up. But those are just some other options, potential options for you. I say this every time I speak. When you stabilize your practice, you regain your freedom. I want to thank you all for participating. I want to thank Alyssa and Lexier for hosting this. At the very least, I hope that I've been able to open your eyes to what your possibilities are. I really hope you found it informative and energizing and know that you are in control. My company, Get Ahead Coaching and Consulting, offers personalized coaching that empowers others. And I have a team of 3 powerhouse women who are coaches along with me, who combined have 70+ years of dental practice experience. When you add me in, we have over 100 years of dental practice experience. So there's nothing you can throw at us that we haven't already come across. Our goal for our clients is to help them and their teams enjoy their days more and live better lives. That's what gets me out of bed every morning. And the side effect is that they all make more money too. Yeehaw. So please take down my contact information. Drop me a note if you're interested at all in how Get Ahead Coaching and Consulting can help you take better control of your life. So I want to thank you, and we'll get to the questions. And Alyssa, I'll go to the next slide for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That was excellent. I love seeing just the real life examples. It's not just smoke and mirrors. It does actually work. You got to put in a little bit of the legwork up front, but it certainly makes sense in the long run. If there's any questions, feel free to plug them in on the chat. I don't see anything as of yet. You have Geraldine's contact information, you have my contact information, so feel free to reach out to, either of us. If you would, just take a quick moment. We really value your feedback just in terms of the content, the webinar, logistics, all that good stuff. We're always striving to bring content and things that will be beneficial to you all as far as the education that we offer. So if you could just take a quick moment and just scan that QR and go through our survey, we certainly value your feedback. Take a look at our website. We do have our other education courses listed on it where you can go on and register directly, all the flyers, all the links. We certainly are ramping up what we're offering in education, so there will be a lot more to come, and hopefully more with Dr. Alfie if she can fit us in into her schedule as well.
You're always one of my highest priorities, Alyssa. You know that.
She's very much in demand, so we appreciate her time this evening. CE credits are brought to you through our partner at CareFirst Dental Institute. So that will typically take about 7 to 10 days to turn around. So keep an eye out from an email, most likely from me, with your certificates. And please keep in touch, and we hope to see you at the next program.
So when there are no questions at the end, it either means I explained everything perfectly, which I know or everyone's just their head spinning that they can't even think. So please reach out to me and Alyssa afterwards, because I know questions pop up after we've discussed everything, and we're here to just help make your life easier.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Alfie, and thank you, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.